Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Watchmen Podcast, your go-to source for everything related to safety and community at Rollins Middle School of Arts. And I am your host, Deputy Slusher. And I am here to shine a spotlight on the vibrant art showcases, thrilling sporting events, captivating performances of our amazing school and students. So join us as we celebrate creativity, foster connections, and build a stronger community together. Whether you're a student, parent, or passionate supporter of the arts, there is something here for everyone. So let's dive in and explore the heartbeat of Rollins Middle School. What happens when passion meets purpose and the classroom becomes a stage for something bigger? Today on the Watchmen Podcast, we step inside a place where creativity isn't just taught, it's lived, where students don't just perform, they discover who they are. At Rollins Middle School of the Arts are more than a curriculum. They're a calling. And behind that calling are educators who are shaping lives far beyond the stage. Our guest today is one of those educators, a former student turned teacher, now pouring back into the very program that helped shape him. From walking the ruins of ancient Greece, the birthplace of theater, to bringing those lessons back to the classroom full of young minds, to pushing students beyond comfort zones and into growth, teamwork, and resilience. This is more than theater. This is mentorship. This is legacy in motion. Real voices, real service, real impact. Let's dive in. Adam, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining me today on The Watchmen. Very, very excited, episode 10. And I'm very excited to dive into your journey, to your story, from where it started in the beginning to where we are now as a teacher here, theater teacher here at Rollins Middle School. But before we get into the meat and potatoes on what you're doing with your students at Rollins, I want to take it back to the beginning with you. Take us back. What does it mean to you to now teach at Rollins Middle School of the Arts after being a student at Rollins Middle School of the Arts?
It has been like a truly amazing experience to come back here and work now as colleagues alongside all like my former teachers and mentors that I knew when I was a kid. In some ways, it's been kind of similar because I came from a Rawlings family, so to speak. Both my older brothers came to Rawlings. So by the time I got here as a student, everybody already kind of knew who I was. A lot of the teachers, they had one of my brothers. Some of them had both, or they knew my parents, or they went to church with my grandparents or something like that. So I had a lot of family connections here at Rawlings as a student. And of course, coming back as a teacher, now I've just had more years for those connections to grow and get deeper, and it's really amazing. It feels a lot more like a work family. I know that's sort of a bit like an overused phrase, but many of the people that I work with, I have known for almost my entire life, which is a really awesome experience to have because it's people who I trust, people who I have confidence in, and people who I enjoy being around.
When you were going to, listen, Rollins is a very special place. And our students, the students that go here, know that this is a special place. People are lined up to audition to get into this place. When you were a student here at Rollins, how did it feel? Did you know you were at a special place and there were so many people that you auditioned against? But did you know then how such an amazing place this was that you were going to come back and teach here at Rollins?
I definitely didn't know that my path was leading towards like education back when I was in middle school. I didn't really know what I was going to end up doing as a career. I know a lot of kids know when they're young, but that wasn't me. I sort of discovered that later in life. But as far as understanding just that where I was special, I think at first, not quite. Coming in as sixth grade, it was sort of just like transitioning from elementary to middle school is a big change for anybody, no matter where you're going. So it was hugely different from where I was in the past, and I just knew that it was going to be different, but I didn't really appreciate how different it was from the other middle schools in the area or where other of my peers went to. But as time went on, getting more and more friends who went to other middle schools. Back in the day when we had the chain buses to get to Rawlings, I had to take a bus to Alston Middle School and then take a bus to Rawlings. And I got to be friends with a lot of those students and just seeing what their schedules were like or what they were doing in their performances. It started to become more and more apparent that like I do have some significant opportunities here at Rawlings that I did not, or that my peers at other middle schools did not get to have. So I'm very, very grateful for that and how it shaped me. And even though I didn't know it at the time, it was sort of putting me on the trajectory to come back here and give that back to the community in the future.
So you were at the original Rollins.
Yes.
Correct. So what was it like going through the original Rollins, I call it, to where Rollins is now, to come back to this beautiful, amazing building and teach, where, the stage is, the Performing Arts Center? How was it from the old Rollins to the new Rollins?
In a lot of ways, the character has kind of stayed the same, because it's not necessarily about the building; it's about the people,
Right.
So many of the people who taught me back in the day, who worked there, are still here. So it's a lot of that has maintained. The character and the culture here has remained the same, but now we have like amazing, fantastic facilities here that sort of can't compare to the other
amazing
places in the area. I feel very, very grateful and fortunate to be able to teach and educate and direct shows here, with all of the resources that we have access to. I feel really fortunate to put on shows with a much higher production value than I would be able to at a lot of other middle schools, or maybe even high schools. In some other ways, I do think the character has changed a little bit. At the other building, there was more of a sense of like history.
Right.
We have a few plaques and posters and photos here on the walls of the old school and the old Somerville High School Stadium and the old gym and stuff. And it's fun to sort of walk through the halls here and see like, oh, that is where I took PE with Mr. Pippin, or that's where I would hang out at Courtyard with my friends. But just having a little plaque on the wall here is not quite the same as standing there,
right,
with those old brick buildings and the character that it used to have.
And speaking of history, you just mentioned history, and I want to say this year, the staff got together and did a play for the students, and I think it was governed on the Rollins, some archive or something out of Rollins, or the skit or the play was something to do with Rollins Middle School. Which I thought was outstanding. But another thing is, me being the SRO here at this school, I'm privy to a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, a lot of the backstage stuff, a lot of the preparation, way before the magic happens or it even hits the stage. And I've sat back and I've observed you, I've observed the students. It's incredible to see what it is, in the cafeteria or on stage, and I'll walk in and I'll see and I'll go, oh boy, this, I know nothing about theater. But then to see the end project or product when it's completed is just amazing. How do you get because there has to be trust. Mm-hmm. Your students need to be bought in, that your students need to trust.
Absolutely.
You. How do you, I might be getting a little bit ahead of myself, but how do you dial in, especially sixth graders? They come in a little nervous. How do you dial them in to say, guys, we're one team and we're going to get this done? Because sixth graders probably don't have a lot of experience in theater.
No, they generally don't have a ton of prior experience. I think sort of compared to the other corps here, a lot of our dance students have been dancing since they were 3 years old, or our string students have been taking private lessons for years, or things like that. So I think a lot of our theater students come in, compared to the other corps, with sort of less prior experience. This year has been a exception to that rule. I have a lot of sixth graders who have been involved in theater since kindergarten, who do shows in the community. I got a student who's performed at Dock Street a couple of times. Two of them, actually. So this year has been a really unique experience, because not only do my students come in with tons of talent, we know that they have talent because they had to audition to be here, but they had a lot of skill coming in this year as well, which has been nice. And as far as wrangling them in and getting them to trust each other and work together, I find that it's actually tends to be a lot easier with the sixth graders. They show up and they're bright-eyed and they're excited for it and they're willing to do anything to get involved. And as they grow up, I think this is a little bit of sort of the natural teenage inclination as you sort of get to 13 or 14 years old. Eighth graders start to seem like they might be a little bit too cool for things, and that is where I really have to try to get the engagement and try to get the buy-in. And it's a delicate balancing act, because you, not just as a teacher, but as a mentor, it takes a village. We're all here trying to help raise these children. There's a balancing act between where you have to lay down the law and saying, I'm the teacher and this is how we're going to do things, and where you get to let them have their own individuality. Because around this age in middle school and early high school, that is where students are figuring out who they are, what they want in life, what kind of person they want to be, what kind of art they want to do. So I really need to get more buy-in, try to find things that work with my 8th graders as opposed to my 6th graders. It's going to be a little bit easier. They're kind of down for anything.
Right. Because theater, I mean, what is theater all about? It's about having fun.
Exactly, right? They call it, let's do a play, right? It is play. It is supposed to be fun. It is supposed to be
wheel them back in like, hey, we're just running around on stage. Now I got to sit down at the table and do my studies.
Yes.
Because I'm sure in your class it's more than just being on stage and having a skit and props. There's history behind it. And speaking of history, you recently traveled to Greece, which is the birthplace of theater. What was that experience like, standing where this art form began?
I mean, for me, it is like electrifying. Like you can stand in the middle of that stage. They did a demonstration while we were there at the amphitheater in Epidavros. We stood in the middle and we all like clapped 3 times, and we can hear the echo come back to us. You can hear like a perfect reflection of your own voice while you're on the stage in there. So that in and of itself is just like a surreal acoustic experience. But also that sort of coupled in with the history of what I teach my students about, and being there with my students and watching them with sort of wide eyes looking around and seeing this amazing historical place. It is just it's like an electrifying experience, really. It just sort of fills me with energy. I think I definitely probably get a little bit more out of it than the students do. They're not as into the history as I am, of course. They are children, so getting them to learn that can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes. But it is always refreshing to go and see those things and be able to come back and, now next year when I teach this lesson, I don't have to use photos I found off of Google.
Right.
I have photos that I took myself,
right?
That of me standing
which
there,
makes it a little bit more
students.
authentic.
Exactly. Yeah.
And listen, and that's another thing. Let's think, how many students get the opportunity that go to school and get to dance, sing, perform, or even in theater, have the opportunity to go to Greece? Especially being a theater student, where it all started and originated from. I get to go to Greece to see where it started. I mean, not very many students or middle school kids can say that. No. And it's, but what impact did that trip have on your students?
I think just sort of, rather than the specific lesson about like theater and the history of theater, just being able to see how people live differently on other parts of the world is hugely impactful to the students. There were places in Greece and the smaller towns and villages where we visited where you are not allowed to flush your toilet paper, which to us sounds like a clutch your pearls, like how is that going to work? How are we going to make sure things stay clean? But for the people over there, that's how they've lived their entire life, and we can go to other parts of the world and have some much more different bathroom experiences. Right. That's just one example, but just seeing the different ways of how people live and how culture and life and day-to-day experiences are different in different parts of the world really opens children's eyes. And I think it's important for them to understand that their way of life is not the only way of life. Correct. It leads to them being much more accepting and understanding of other people, because they get to see there's 1,000 different lifestyles that are all perfectly acceptable. But if you only ever see your own and the folks in your community who are very similar to your own, you'll never really understand that in the same way. Right.
Makes a lot of sense. How did seeing those ancient amphitheaters change the way you view and teach?
Really just, I don't know. Just because I like to nerd out about those kinds of things, I'm probably just going to get really giddy and really excited next time I get to talk about it in class.
That's awesome.
And hopefully the children can pick up on that energy. It's always been something I've been kind of interested in. I've enjoyed theater history. It was one of my favorite classes that I got to take in college when I was getting my degree. But doing it with students, like I said, can be a bit like pulling teeth. I say it's our theater history unit, and they all roll their eyes and they moan and groan. But I always try to give them something fun and engaging, tie it to some kind of performance or some kind of design project. I want to make sure that they're not just learning the history, but applying it. Right. And if I can sort of show the diagrams of the Greek theater, but use photos that I am in, pointing, this is where the parados is, and this is where the skein is, and the other parts of the Greek stage that they have to learn. Hopefully it can be a bit more engaging with the just excitement that I can bring to the table.
I think it's incredible. And is this something that you guys do every year? Is this a trip to Greece every year, or are there different locations, or is it based on what you're teaching?
So I'll give a little bit of backstory as to how these trips came to be. So Meg Scow, who is a former visual arts teacher at Raleigh. She's been retired for a couple of years. When I was in middle school, she started partnering with a company called EF, who leads student tours. It stands for Education First. So they're educational tours for students. And I got to go to Italy with her when I was in 7th grade. So the first ever tour that she led, I got to go with as a student. My mom and I went to Italy over spring break, and she continued to do it almost every year for spring break after the fact. When I was in 8th grade, they had planned a trip to Greece, but they ended up having to cancel it because there was a big economic collapse in Greece that year, and conditions weren't great for travel, so they ended up canceling the trip. But now, as an adult working here at Rawlings, sort of what we were talking about in the beginning, being here as a student and now coming back as an adult, as a teacher, I get to chaperone these trips along with her. So we go somewhere different almost every year for spring break. I think she took a year or two off during COVID, but it's been pretty much every year since like 2014. She's taken a group of 40 or so people somewhere in the world to go experience and see what life is like elsewhere and see the art and the culture and the museums and the history. And I think it's just amazing what she's done to expose students to so many experiences, and I'm really, really grateful to have been part of it, both as a student and now being able to give back as a chaperone on these tours as an adult.
Is that somewhat what made your lesson plan this year? Teach about Greece and theater from Greece, where it originated, because knowing that the school and the student body was going to Greece, so is that how your lesson plan?
I was already planning on it, but it was a very happy accident that I got to go and visit it as well. So I teach a different era of theater history with each grade level. Those listening, if you're planning on being in my class in the future, this might change up. I'm thinking of revitalizing some things, but as of right now, I always teach Greek theater history in 6th grade. I teach Shakespeare in 7th grade, and I teach Commedia dell'arte in 8th grade. So they each get their own era of theater history and sort of get an overview of some of the most iconic moments in theater history before, if they continue to go off and study theater more in high school or college, they'll learn about the full breadth of it. But I try to give a taste of what I feel.
And I see the students, man, they love it. Like, they are so engaged when it's showtime. I love coming to the shows. I love walking in the hallways and just hearing and watching. When there's no props, there's no outfits, it's just school clothes, and they're up there rehearsing and doing their thing. It's great. I love it. Greek theater was often used as a voice for the people. Protest through storytelling. How do you translate that concept to 6th graders?
Yeah, so ancient Greece was a very warlike society in many ways, depending on which sort of specific city-state people came from. And there was often wars among the local kings. The citizens didn't always want to be a part of that. So many Greek plays are about protesting against war, taking place during war times, protesting against being sent off against their will to go fight in battles for the king when they didn't really consent to that. Now, our 6th graders here at Summerville, South Carolina, are fortunately not being sent off to war, but they do have some very terrifying things that they have to deal with in their day-to-day lives, like homework and not being allowed to have snacks in class, or the dress code, and all the sorts of horrors that are so terrifying to a 6th grader. So as I finish up teaching the history, actually, I only spend maybe 2 or 3 days actually covering the history, the quote-unquote boring part in my class. But then they spend the next few weeks putting together a performance in the style of ancient Greece. So they choose a rule that they would like to protest, and I encourage them. Sometimes they can make up a rule. A couple years ago, I had a group of students who their rule that they wanted to protest was in a fantasy society where pickles had been banned, and they had to protest to bring back pickles. And they walked around on stage with signs chanting "pickles for the people," and it was hilarious, and I got a lot of laughs. But some of them are a little bit more closer to home, like homework and things like that. Students protesting against having to do Edmentum every week. So they get to write and perform a short play in the style of ancient Greece, with 3 actors on stage playing multiple characters. That was the tradition in Greece. They would swap masks to play multiple characters, but it was usually only 3 actors. And then accompanied by a Greek chorus, which are sort of like poetic narrators who help tell the story in between the scenes.
What does that say with the snacks, the phones that you're talking about? What does that say about giving kids a voice?
I think it's really important. Like I mentioned earlier, it's a balancing act of trying to give them the opportunity to express themselves, but also set down boundaries of, like, I am the teacher, these are the expectations. And I find that giving them almost any assignment, no matter how boring it can be. If you can give them a topic that they're interested in, they'll jump right into it and be super duper excited about it, especially the sixth graders, because they're so excitable. They're the babies of the group. So yeah, just giving them the opportunity to explore something that they find interesting within the parameters of, a theatrical performance where I set the expectations. It's the perfect balance of they get to do something to express their voice, but also they get to fulfill these standards and expectations of what it means to write and rehearse and put together a play.
Right.
So they get to bring the two things together.
What's one student moment from those performances that has really stuck with you?
On a sillier note, the Pickles for the People one really, really has. Just because it was so funny. I think my favorite ones are always when students end up playing teachers. I had a student play me this year on stage. I have students almost every year play Mr. Pie. And they always want to wear a tie. They always have to have a tie for Mr. Pie, which is really, really funny. So yeah, I think it's just finding framing it as like a protest piece makes it sound like really serious and intense. But really they are lighthearted, right? So the opportunity to have fun with students, let them get out their frustration about something that they disagree with, and do it in the sort of a fun and exciting way, and use that love of theater that they have to sort of express themselves in that way, just leads to lots of laughs on stage and lots of laughs from the parents and families, which I really appreciate. We sort of had a history at Rawlings. I like to tell my students, I was like, we often have a dead audience at our shows,
right?
Which is where they come and they sit and they're silent and they watch intently the whole time. And after the show, they'll tell you how much they loved it. But during the show, they are dead silent.
Well, I've got to say, the shows that I've watched, I'm glued. Like, there's not a moment to where, like anything in life, you could be watching a TV and you kind of say, oh, and then something will spark. But your shows I've been engaged consistently, like anticipating the next, what's coming next.
I appreciate that. Yeah. So one of my goals as a teacher, as like a director working with young children, this comes from a production that I saw when I was in high school at Flower Town Players. This was roughly 2018-ish. They did a production of School of Rock Junior. So it was a entirely under 18 cast. The adults were played by high schoolers, and then the students were played by like elementary and middle schoolers. Right. So it was a junior production, fully under 18. And to this day, it is one of the best live musicals I've ever seen. And a good friend of mine played Dewey in it. He was the lead. And the way that we all described it is I was like, this is not a good children's show. This is just a good show.
Right.
Period. And that is one of my goals as a teacher. Like, I don't want to put on something that parents have to come sit through to support their kid. And I know that they would love to. They love to see their babies on stage in anything. Right. And I think a lot of parents sort of come to these shows expecting to sit through a production and see their child shine on stage for 2 minutes, and they're so proud of them. But it's a lot of sitting through the rest of it. I think that's a lot of what parents expect when they come to these things. But I really want to put on a good show, period. Not a good children's show, not good for middle school, but just good, period.
Yeah, and it's great quality. I mean, it really is good. It's incredible. But you mentioned some technology and phones and snacks. And one of the things that we face today is social media, the internet. Kids are so engaged now, and instead of reading a book or something, they want to read online, or they can find anything online at their fingertips. And a lot of that is not accurate information. A lot of it's misinformation. But your students are performing the day the internet died. Mm-hmm. That hits close to home in today's world. What message do you hope that they walk away with?
Yeah, so that's my sixth grade play. It's actually at the time of recording, that's actually tomorrow, so it will already have passed by the time that this goes out. There's a bit of it is a very, very silly, goofy play, but there is a bit of an underlying message of the sort of the somewhat predatory nature of big tech companies. Mm-hmm. When the internet goes out in this town, Amazon and Google and Facebook and Microsoft have no way to make ad revenue off of these people. So they have to send somebody in to manually hand out coupons and pass out revenue. And instead of your phone listening to your conversation and suggesting things, there's a man in this town who's sneaking in and listening to people's conversations and handing them coupons based off of what they're talking about right now in this second. So it definitely is, I mean, it's a comedy, it's goofy, but as with all comedy, there's sort of like a layer of truth under it, showing like there's a message there. So hoping students understand that, like, yes, there are maybe responsible ways to be used, and the internet and social media can be used in moderation. But the underlying reason that it's there is to sort of hook you in and get you addicted and try to make money off of you. Facebook is not the product. You are the product that they are selling to advertisers.
Right.
So
exciting.
Yeah.
Exciting. And that performance is tomorrow night?
Tomorrow night, yeah.
Tomorrow night. Can't wait. In a generation driven by screens, how important is it to teach face-to-face connection through theater?
So important, of course, and I think it's one of the best ways that we can do it in schools day to day. Oftentimes, students, many in their other classes, are glued to screens because we have so many educational programs that we're sort of required to use now. To teach sort of like math and English, and that all their testing is done on screens. So in theater, that's one of the rare times during the day where I have to make them put the screens away, rather than telling them to take them out and open up this assignment. Put it away, stop working on something for another class. I have students who are working on their admentum and things in my class all the time. But they need to put it away, stand up, get up on their feet, move, speak to other students in the room. And some of the playwriting and things, that's sort of moved over to a digital thing because it's easier to do that in Microsoft Word now than it is to do it on paper. But the bulk of what we do in class, students are face-to-face, in person, not assisted by technology. And you learn so many soft skills through theater: how to work with others, how to communicate, how to collaborate, imagination. In the age of AI, where everybody is using that to create anything, I am staunchly against that. Not just as a teacher, we want to maintain academic integrity. People not using AI to cheat on their assignments and things like that. I've got a handful of students doing that this year and last year, and it's something that we do have to deal with, unfortunately. But as an artist, that message is so much more important to me. One of the most amazing things that we have as human beings that makes us unique from other creatures on the planet is our intelligence and our creativity and our imagination. And relying on technology, especially artificial intelligence, eliminates that. It replaces the need for human creativity, which is terrifying to me, honestly.
It's scary.
Yeah.
It's scary because it's not authentic.
Exactly.
And it teaches a society to become lazy. Well, I can wait till the last 20 minutes before it's time for showtime and just have some AI or whatever it is generate whatever it needs to generate for me. And it's just not authentic. Your 8th graders took on A Wrinkle in Time, a more serious, ensemble-driven production. Why was it important for you to challenge them in that way?
Yeah, so my 8th graders are a group who have produced so far in their 6th and 7th grade productions 2 hilarious comedies, and they were really wanting to do something similar for their final show in 8th grade. They even asked me, can we just redo our 7th grade play? They loved it so much. I loved it. Maybe in a few years I'll revisit it and direct it again with a different group of students. In the realm of sort of creativity, imagination, we have to push students to their limits. In educational terms, we call that the zone of proximal development. You have the zone of what you are capable of doing on your own. You have the zone of what you were unable to do. But in between, there's this narrow band of what you can do with a little bit of assistance. And for an ideal learning environment, that's where we need to keep students, where we're pushing them just beyond their limits, where they can struggle, get a little frustrated, and exercise their brain to learn something a little bit more and a little bit different from what they knew before. So taking on a more dramatic piece, and 2, this ensemble-driven adventure, was a challenge for my 8th graders on both those parts. They had done comedies before, and also both of the plays that they had done previously I tried to find roles that sort of, for the most part, equally feature each student. And that was not necessarily the case with this 8th grade production, which I think is a good life lesson, good training if they continue on with theater in their life. The ensemble often carries the show. They are the what makes the show feel big and exciting. They're what makes the show feel professional, and in many ways can be the most important part of the show. But many students feel like getting cast in the ensemble is like a punishment, like they weren't good enough. But I really, really relied on a handful of my ensemble actors who had it together, who were my most reliable people in the cast, who helped put the whole ensemble together and help their classmates stay on track.
Nice. What does ensemble work teach students that individual performances can't?
So first, just the understanding that the ensemble is important. There's a sort of degree of humility that students have to learn. Like, you can be important without being the star in the spotlight. You know, students often tend to think very black or white. They're the lead role or they are nothing, right? And we really need them to understand that there's so much in between there. And being the lead role is sometimes often not the most exciting role. Oftentimes in a musical, if you're like a sort of a lead or supporting role, you might have like 1 or 2 solos. But if you're an ensemble member, you are in every single number on stage all the time. You've got a lot more to learn. It's a lot more work to do. But students see it as sort of like the easy beginner step.
You've said something powerful. Frustration is what learning feels like. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so that actually comes from, in the realm of social media. I'm a little ashamed to admit this, but this is something that I saw on probably like Instagram Reels or something like that. But it came from Dr. Becky Kennedy. And she's a psychologist who works with educators and things. And she said frustration is what learning feels like. And that is so true. She calls it the learning space. And that's similar to the concept I was talking about just a second ago, the zone of proximal development. To be pushed just beyond your limits is going to be frustrating. In that space between knowing and not knowing, there's this whole vast sea of learning. And in order to learn, you got to fail. Right. And when you fail, you're going to get frustrated. So being frustrated, oftentimes that's when students want to give up or go do something easier, or if they're at home, pick up their phone and scroll for a minute because they're getting overwhelmed with their homework. But that frustration, learning to deal with that frustration, is so important for their learning and also so important for their emotional growth. Being just emotional tolerance, being able to tolerate uncomfortable situations, which I think is something that students really are not very good at these days. That's why I find myself doing all the time. My wife has to get on me if we're bored for 2 seconds. If the TV starts buffering, I'll grab my phone, Right. And, I kind of got to laugh when I got to tell students not to do the same thing because I know I'm probably just as bad as they are with.
And that's like frustrations, like with me, when this whole concept of the Watchmen, it's about highlighting our students, but it's just not about our students. It's highlighting the talent of our teachers as yourself. But I didn't know. And I remember the beginning, like I just thought it was, I say this all the time, it was talking into a microphone, hitting the record, talking into a microphone, and then poof, you just upload it. No, there were so many moving parts and people behind the scenes.
Lots of editing and behind, yeah.
But so I would get frustrated. And, there's one thing in life, I don't ever give up. But when I was realizing there's so much more that I probably should have taken the time to do my research on what a podcast was all about, or an interview, or a conversation, I probably wouldn't have been as frustrated. But each episode that goes by, my frustrations get less and less and less and less. After 3 years together with your 8th graders, how would you describe the bond between you and your students?
We really do get to be close. I have a lot of students who will eat lunch in my room every single day for 3 years. So it's not just they're in class with me. They're also hanging out with their friends. Sometimes they're kind of hanging out with me. They want to chat and have a conversation about this or that or the other, or tell me about this new video game they got, or tell me about how they're getting their hair done this weekend, or tell me about their nail appointment, I just enjoyed being able to talk to the kids. Right. And that's why I really, really value here at Rawlings. We have ILT, which is sort of like a free period kind of combined with lunch. Students have the opportunity to communicate with each other and communicate with their teachers in sort of a bit of a less structured environment. Oftentimes during a lesson, I got a handful of students who all have to say like, okay, we can chat another time. I gotta focus on the rest of the class.
Right.
Now's not the time to chat and hang out.
That's a distraction.
Yeah.
I can't get on social media, but I'll distract the teacher so we can have, we don't
have
dive
a few
right
minutes.
into it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But when they get to hang out with me during ILT or things like that is when we really get to build those relationships. And of course, after school rehearsals, we have a little bit more free time for a minute here and there, and the students sort of bond with each other. I think from their perspective, when I was a student, I definitely did the same thing. When I was a student, I definitely felt the same thing. Like the teacher was such like an important, impactful part of my life. Now as a teacher, it's kind of funny realizing like the students are being impactful with each other and I'm there.
Right.
It's the relationship that they've formed with each other that they're really going to value and cherish for the rest of their life that shaped them. And I sort of have some force to sculpt how that relationship is formed and things like that. But really, it's the relationships with each other that the students form that are really going to be long-lasting, that are going to serve them through their lives.
And not every student will pursue theater, but every student walks away with something. What life skills do you see theater instilling in your students?
Yeah, so teamwork is probably the number one thing. In theater, we have people with varying degrees of prior experience, like we talked about earlier, and they come in, and we have some students who have been performing since kindergarten, and we have some students who have a lot of natural talent and did well on their audition, but they really have no prior experience coming to Rawlings. So being able to learn to work with others of all skill levels is something that's really, really important to them, or really, really important for them to learn.
Right.
I find that oftentimes sort of like my highest performing students sometimes get frustrated with my students who are learning a little bit more along the way. And that is a delicate relationship that I have to balance, because I don't want to put the responsibility on the higher learning students. I don't want to punish them by saying, like, you take care of these other children. That's definitely not their role. That's my job. But also to a certain degree, I do need them to work together. I do need them to find some way to come together. So being able to work with others, being able to understand each other's strengths and weaknesses, rely on each other's strengths and support each other through their weaknesses. Right. So many interpersonal skills are learned through theater, and also just problem solving. Backstage during a show, there's a million things that can go wrong, and I really try to do what I can to have my students address those things on their own. Many times, especially in sixth grade when they're sort of just learning this, they'll tell me about everything that goes wrong. And my first response is like, well, what did you do about it?
Right.
Like, did you try to solve this problem before you talked to me about it? And usually in sixth grade, the answer is no.
Right.
But by the time they get to eighth grade, 2 weeks after the show, they'll say, oh yeah, this thing broke backstage, I fixed it. And I'm like, oh, what? I had no idea,
That's awesome.
So getting them to sort of take that responsibility to solve problems on their own is something that they really walk away with.
When you look at your role, do you see yourself more as a teacher, a mentor, or something even bigger?
Ooh, something even bigger. I like that. That really blows up my ego. Thank you for saying that. No, I really do see myself as a mentor. When I was a student, the most impactful teachers I had were, yes, my theater teachers, of course. That's sort of who influenced me to go on and this path in life and follow the same lead. But even outside the world of theater, just my other teachers who I had that I always looked up to the most are the teachers who were just like authentic with their children, with their students. And when I was going through my like teacher education program in college, they talked a lot about creating your teacher persona. Like, what is the sort of personality you're going to have in front of your students? How are you going to act? How are you going to behave with them? What kind of sense of humor do you want to have? And I think for younger students, like kindergarten, first, second grade, that does kind of make sense. But even once you get into the upper elementary levels, and absolutely once you get into middle and high school level, students can tell when you're not being genuine with them. Students can tell when you're putting on a persona. So my philosophy has always been like, I want to show my students what like a real adult looks like. We have Reality Town in 8th grade where they get to come and sort of do like a financial life simulation, and we have a guidance counselor who comes in and debriefs them and, did you have enough money in your budget and that kind of thing. And usually after the counselor leaves, I'll have my own debriefing with them, and I'll be upfront with them, I am a few years out of college, my student loans are paid off, I'm this, that, these are what bills look like for me as an adult. And a lot of adults don't want to talk about those things with children because they feel like it's inappropriate or they're not old enough to understand that. But if we start exposing them to that idea that, the younger they are when they start learning it, the more prepared they'll be when they get to be adults
100%.
and when they go through it. So just being an authentic person with them and showing them what a real adult looks like that isn't putting on a show because they're working with children. I think that is what really is going to be a valuable mentorship to them, to show them like this is what it looks like in the real world, not some facsimile of that.
Years from now, when your students look back at their time at Rollins, what do you hope they remember most?
I would love to say I'd hope they remember all the important life lessons and things they learned, but really and truly, I think they're gonna remember the laughs. Right. They're gonna remember the good times. They're gonna remember the goofy things that this person said in class, or the drama that person had, or when these two students broke up and it was the end of the world for the next week or something like that. Those are the things that I remember most from middle school. I think as teachers, we often have to sneak in the lessons alongside the engaging things.
Yes.
So it's a bit like being a spy. Yes, we're doing this fun, crazy, ridiculous project, but also you're learning about teamwork during it. Right. So I think it's kind of nice actually that the thing that they're most conscious of is not the thing that they're learning about. Right. We gotta hide the learning in there sometimes because they're opposed to that sometimes.
In closing, such a powerful to have you on here today and to listen to your story. Take a few moments and speak to your students, your sixth graders and the students that you've had for 3 years. Take a moment and speak to them, and let them know how you feel and how it's been to be with them for the school year, and some of the impact that they might have had on you that maybe they don't know about.
So I guess first I'll just say, it's the end of May. We're wrapping up the school year. We only got a few days left. It has been a fantastic school year. There's been challenges along the way. There's been things we've all had to work through. But learning through that, the frustration and working through that frustration, I have learned a lot from it. I hope you've learned a lot from it too. I think what I want my students to know is that they are a big, important part of my life. There's a big project that I like to do at the end of every year with my eighth graders as they're wrapping up. This is sort of like after they've taken their final exam, we got a few days left to sort of do something fun but still somewhat educational. I call it 15 Things I Learned in Mr. Weick's class. And they have to give me a presentation, and I let them work in pairs. At least 8 of the lessons have to be about theater. But the other ones can be about anything. They can be random fun facts that I've talked about when I get distracted in class. They could be life lessons. A lot of them do things that they learned about me. So I had a student who just presented on Monday, and they basically wrote everything that they knew about my love story with my wife and I. Because I got married earlier this school year, so I was absent for a few days. So I was absent for a while. My students asked why I was absent. I told them I was getting married, these 8th graders that I had, they were in 6th grade when I was absent because I went on a long weekend trip with my wife and ended up proposing to her.
Right.
These are things that I sort of mention offhand in class. We talk about how was your weekend, and I mentioned this and that. And it is really, really comforting to know that it was something that stuck with them. It wasn't just like an offhand conversation, right. and it's something that they paid attention to and they enjoyed hearing about. And that there's one sort of more lesson that I want to leave you with as my students as you grow up. This is another quote that I'm going to steal, as most good quotes are. Corinne Tayo, she's the theater teacher at Fort Dorchester High School. She shared this with me, and she got it from a professional friend of hers who, unfortunately, I don't know who originally stated this, but Corinne Tayo was the one who shared this with me. The joy of the work comes when you've done your homework, right? It takes a lot of work to prepare for a performance. We're outside of the world of performance of any sort of work that you are going to enjoy. You need to prepare. You need to practice. You need to set up. You need to rehearse. You need to learn your lines. And those things are not always fun, right? Students come in here, especially if they sort of have prior summer camp experience, they expect theater to be all fun and games. Right. And there's some of that, but there's also some serious work too. So I want my students to sort of learn to balance the work and the homework. You get to have fun in theater when you're prepared for class. And my students know very well You don't have fun in theater when you are not memorized by the time you're supposed to be.
Right.
And you don't have fun in theater when you haven't written down your blocking and we need to reblock these scenes because students don't remember what they're supposed to be doing. So just remember, the joy of the work comes when you've done your homework.
That's awesome. And to the theater students here, I just want to let you know that your performances are incredible. They're outstanding. Keep pushing forward. Don't slow down. Don't put your foot on the brake, and keep going. Adam, thank you again for joining me on The Watchmen.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's a wrap.
What we heard today isn't just about theater. It's about transformation. It's about a teacher who once sat in those same seats, now standing at the front of the room, guiding, challenging, and believing in the next generation. It's about students learning more than lines and stage direction. They're learning how to think, how to collaborate, and how to push through frustration, and how to find their voice. Because the stage at Rawlings Middle School of Arts isn't just preparing performers. It's building leaders, communicators, and future difference makers. And that's what it's all about. Investing in our youth, because engagement with our youth is the cornerstone of our collective success. Adam, thank you for what you do, not just as a teacher, but as a mentor and a builder of futures. And to everyone listening, if this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of the impact one person can have, share it. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow the Watchmen Podcast on all major platforms. So until next time, take care.